All right, looks like we have most of our folks coming in. Looks like a few more attendees are trickling in, so we'll go ahead and get started. Want to again thank everyone for joining us on this Community Foundation CEO Virtual Roundtable, the new normal with COVID-19. Appreciate the help of CEONet in launching this just in a matter of a few business days. And I want to thank a tremendous cast of speakers and leaders in this field for taking time out to join us. I'd like to go ahead and get this kicked off by bringing in our Mike Batchelor. He's with the Erie Community Foundation up there in Pennsylvania. And Mike, you have had a long and glorious history of making things happen for this field, and particularly with the affinity group, the CEONet. So welcome to you, and thank you for helping us get this kicked off.
Thanks, Brad. I'd like to thank you and Kathleen and the council for working quickly and hard to get this up and running. I'd also like to thank some of my peers who've been working with me over the last years, actually, to try to reinvigorate CEONet. This is still a work in progress, but I think this crisis that we're all facing certainly demonstrates the need for CEOs to have support, to know each other, to trust each other, and to be able to dialogue. So I'm grateful for those of you that are out there. I hope you're all safe, and I know you're all working hard to help your communities. So with those brief intro comments, I'll kick it back over to Brad and next speaker. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We're going to now turn over to these fabulous leaders that have taken time out to be with us today. We have Kathleen Enright here from the Council on Foundations, Deborah Elwood with the CF Leads, and David Rosado with CF Insights. I can't thank each of you enough for all that you do for the field, and in particular, carving out a little bit of time here to share us a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and in particular, what the organizations that you each represent is bringing forward to help the field and to all the listeners. So with that, I'd like to start by kicking it off with Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I just want to add my thanks to Brad's for our partners at CEONet, and also to the folks from the council who are working the magic behind the scenes. I think that's principally Daniela and Manuela today. So thank you for all of that. And I'm here in this beautiful video screen with two wonderful partners, Deborah and David. You'll be hearing from them in a second, but we really appreciate that we're in this with all of you. You know, I'm just going to say a couple things about the centrality and importance of community foundations given the crisis that we're all facing. I mean, our communities have never needed us more, and you are taking incredible, quick action in response. You are already trusted, essential institutions, and I think that you have become that over time because you do three things incredibly well. First, community foundations, you democratize philanthropy. You're working on a variety of needs with a wide base of community donors. You also are incredibly connected to your own communities. So as a result, you can act quickly when critical issues arise. And then finally, you lead with integrity. You are trusted. You've earned the trust of the people and institutions in the places where you live and work. And all three of these strengths are going to be incredibly important to the challenges ahead. In terms of democratizing philanthropy, we're going to need you to marshal many new resources to address the scale of this crisis. I mean, the broadest based donor network, the broadest based group of folks are going to be needed. The fact that you already have those folks and you're close proximity to them, you have great capacity to engage with donors and connect them to those most directly in need, you know, and then clearly with the emergency funds that you're already either reactivating or standing up or repurposing. All of these are ways that you're going to be and already are central to this response. Your connection ability, I mean, so many folks in community philanthropy are frontline expert responders to disaster in all different kinds of ways. And so you're already good at working with state and local officials. You're terrific about being on the front lines. And so those relationships, not only with community leaders, but with grantees and others, you're going to help others see firsthand those signs and signals and early warning about ways we might need to pivot in order to be able to respond more effectively. You know, the full sector is looking for community foundations for the on-the-ground responses, and you're already leading beautifully. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I can't wait to hear about all of the creative solutions that I don't even know about yet that you're standing up in the past 10 days. But one of the things that you know better than most is that in any kind of disaster response, we have to think hard about how the recovery is going to be it's going to take a really long time. It's not going to be short term. And so, of course, this short term responsiveness is incredibly critical, but you're going to help guide your communities through what will probably be a pretty long and potentially tough road ahead. Finally, I'll just say a word about the integrity that you bring to this situation. You know, there is no better time to center those most vulnerable among us. And to think about how we're making decisions in the best interests of the greater good. You are already really mission-centered organizations, and you're doing that with the critical responses that you're making right away. And you're also going to be weaving the community together, not just in the immediate response to this health crisis, but also the mental and emotional needs that folks are going to have based on being isolated. We've already heard about, you know, your connection to the arts and to the environment and other things that are helping just new and creative, providing new and creative supports, excuse me, you know, to those who are just struggling, really struggling right now. And you also have this situation where there's an added degree of difficulty in your work. I mean, you're not only grant makers, but you are raising money, and the economies might make that a little bit hard in the short term. Your operations are probably not set up to be fully remote. I've definitely heard from some community foundation friends about how they're sorting out how to, you know, stop using hard checks, paper checks, and all of those kinds of things. And then you still need to try to think about the soundness of some of these business decisions in light of really doing the mission-driven work and doing it maybe sometimes when you're not resourced to do it. So there's pressure on multiple fronts that we understand, and you know, added to that, when and if one of our team members, so one of your team members, gets sick with this, we'll want to support them, and we'll probably find it, you know, kind of a challenge to do that, both because of social distancing and other capacity constraints. So this is a complex, incredibly complex, difficult leadership moment. But I think that the community foundations who are on the ground are going to be among the most important responders that we have. So I just want to say out loud and frequently that we are here to help you adapt. We're here to try to stand up new resources that you need when you think you need them. Brad is, you know, the conversation with CEONet is great, and Brad is talking about doing more regular, smaller groups just for peer sharing, because you are each other's best resource, and we clearly know that. I don't want to take up too much time, so I think I'm going to stop there. We could give you a quick legislative update, but I think it's going to be coming by email in short order, so I'm just going to cede the rest of the time so that we can get to Deborah and David. Thank you. Brad, do you want me to just hand it?
I'm going to turn it over to Deborah.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Can you hear me? Thank you, Kathleen. I share many of your perspectives and sentiments. In the conversations I've had with CEOs over the past couple of weeks, I see that you are juggling a lot. And you are working 24/7 like I've never seen before. And I think, first of all, as Kathleen touched on, there are some incredible operations challenges, helping folks work remotely, and just basic technological challenges related to that, or the productivity issues related to folks who have kids at home and can't bring them over to help. Then just ensuring you have decent HR policies in place, both for those who may get sick and if they have family members who may get sick, and that's a real reality. And then, of course, many of you, like many of us, are doing contingency budgets due to the volatility of the stock market. So all of those kinds of things. But then on top of that, seeing many CEOs having to take on this incredibly important role of consoler in chief. This is an incredibly scary time for all of us, particularly people who are in vulnerable populations or they know people in vulnerable populations. Mom died on February 27th. I spent that whole week with her. I can't imagine if that had happened. And there are many people like that who are in these excruciatingly painful situations. And I know many of those people are on your staff. So thank you for that particular role. So hopefully we can all, various infrastructure organizations can bring you the resources you need. But then at the same time, of course, is the external community work. And many community foundations are already setting up funds. It sounds like COF and CF Insights and maybe the Community Foundation Awareness Organization is also tracking. It sounds like there may be 180 of you. I bet there are many more. And we know how to do this. We know how to set up these kinds of funds. Those of you who have been through disasters are unfortunately very good at this. But we have some lessons about the importance of partnership and transparency. So many of you are setting up funds. But I'm also seeing you really build on the power of recognizing that your work is so much more than grant making. And even in this incredible crisis, so much more than the not-for-profit sector. And obviously, financial resources are extremely important, but your ability to come together with others in the community to solve problems is your superpower. And so I see many of you on the phones all weekend with the public sector, working with superintendents of schools to literally figure out how to feed thousands and thousands of kids who will go hungry if they're not at school. Or because you are so close to community, like Kathleen pointed out, you are really able to lift up the needs of vulnerable residents. As more and more of you really focus on equity, you are really tuned into that. And I'm seeing you gathering information. So that role has been really, really important. So we at CF Leads will be focusing on helping you flex that community leadership muscle, learning from each other about the roles community foundations can take on to help bolster the systems that we can see are failing now. And we're going to talk about short-term, emergency kind of response stuff and more long-term community building role. And this is about hearing from each other about the how-to, hearing from somebody else who's had a great idea and can share where they are. So the first thing we're going to do is offer weekly webinars, and we have got one this Thursday from 1 to 2 Eastern. And we'll hear from Ellen Gilligan, who's been doing incredible work with the public sector from Milwaukee. Isaiah Oliver from Flint, who has incredible information because he's lived through this water crisis, which was not like a one-day thing, but lengthy. And then we're going to hear from Patricia Mejia from San Antonio Community Foundation about some of the creative approaches they're taking using an equity lens. And we're, as you CF Insights, COF, and the Community Foundation Awareness Initiative, we're all talking to try to ensure that we can be as complementary and helpful to you as possible so that we can communicate as clearly together as possible. So I really, really want to thank the Council for taking the lead on this particular webinar and for hosting CEONet We're all in this together, and we as infrastructure organizations will do whatever we can to use your time as wisely as possible and help you get through this. So thank you to COF. Thanks to all of you for all you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Absolutely. David, CF Insights, just a quick synopsis of what maybe we need to know from your end.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, and thanks everyone who's joining us today, and I'm happy to be a part of this call and other conversations that are happening in the field. I just want to take just a few seconds to recognize the rapidity with which everyone in this field has responded to this crisis. It's not just the fact that we're seeing so many response plans getting set up so quickly and in response to this crisis, but also this is all being done as many of those in the field, like we are navigating a new reality of working remotely, entirely working, virtually, as all of Candid staff has begun doing last week, and balancing a lot of the personal, challenges that they may pose, while doing a full-time job. So I just want to recognize that for a lot of folks. My own 2.5-year-old daughter is sleeping in the other room right now. So we're navigating it together, and we're all in this together. So I just wanted to share how heartened I am by that. But yeah, so for our part, at Candid, we set up a new, we're calling it a pop-up website. It's basically a mini site at candid.org/coronavirus to get information about how the field is responding. And we are going beyond community foundations, but as has already been noted by Kathleen and then Deborah, community foundations are among the most active to respond during and after crises just like this one already, and are stepping up to the plate to serve those that serve your communities, and serve your communities directly as well, with the various tools in your toolkits. So when you go to that site, you're going to see a whole lot of data that's reflective of the community foundation response, although it will be sort of embedded in the site that has data from other parts of the sector as well. So we're tracking grant distributions. These are data that are derived from news articles and other sources. We have a number of funders that share their grants data with us directly, their transaction level grants data, and so we're using that to seed this site. Already we have $2.2 billion in grants on the site. You can track going to where they're going in terms of the geographic area that's being served by those grants. And you can see this all on a map that's driven by the Foundation Maps platform, which many of you are, I'm sure, are familiar with. We are collecting funding opportunities for those that might be doing research or that might just be in need. So funds that are set up that can be that have RFP processes set up with them, so you can find information about those. We're collecting just news from around the field as well. That's driven by our Philanthropy News Digest platform, and a list of funds that have been set up by community foundations and others, response funds, their mandates, and the geographic areas that those funds are serving as well. And we're going to keep iterating on the site. We, like others in the field, have basically set up these resources just very quickly in response to the crisis as well, and we want to make sure that we're complementing each other's efforts. And so we're going to be in constant touch with the council and CF Leads and the Community Foundation Public Awareness Initiative and others to make sure that we're complementing each other's efforts, and we're maximizing the amount of data that's available to both community foundations and just the rest of the sector as well about how philanthropy is responding. And just two things I'll mention really quickly. One is that we have had a couple of community foundations reach out to us already. I imagine there might be others who may be interested in this. So I did want to mention a platform that we already had set up that's driven by GuideStar.org data. It's called the GuideStar Local Nonprofit Directory. And I'm not going to make this any kind of sales pitch or anything, but a number of you might be CF Insights members already. So we have given access for a year for free for any CF Insights members who want to get access to that. And the Local Nonprofit Directory is a database of all of the nonprofits that are working in your community foundation's catchment area. We give you two lines of code basically that you can drop on your website, and it's a very easy way to share information about the nonprofits in your area to your website's audience and to your donors, so that they can more easily mobilize dollars to support those organizations that might be in need right now, and in the long term as well. And then the last thing I'll just note is that I, like Kathleen, am very excited to hear what you all are doing and how you're responding, because one of our mandates through CF Insights is to do research on the field and to make sure that other community foundations are understanding the operations of their peers. And so we're going to be doing a lot of learning on this call, and moving forward over the next few months, you can be certain that we'll be doing research about how community foundations are navigating this, you know, through the lens of their own sustainability, as well as how they're responding via supporting their communities. So I'll stop there, and I'll go ahead and toss it back over to Brad. Thanks.
All right, thanks, David. Thanks again, Kathleen, Deborah, and David. All right, you can see on the screen, hopefully, we've got an all-star cast here of foundation leaders. They're going to be bringing up their videos. I'm going to lose mine to make way for them. And we have community foundation leaders who have all different experiences and working in different community dynamics at play here. So they're showing up now. So you can see, thank you, Judy, Javier, Darren, Monique, Christy, thank you so much. And we also have Mike on the phone. Thank you for taking some time out. Let's jump right in with some of the questions that no doubt you all are huddling around as we speak with your teams. And let's start with this notion of how you're adapting your grant making strategies. And I might kick this off with tossing it over to Javier, who just relocated himself from sunny, warm, Miami up into Denver. He claims it's warm and cozy there as well, so I'm going to take his word for it. But Javier, thanks for joining us. I'd be curious to know, how is your team shifting, what was probably a very excited and well-oiled programmatic grant schedule to now all of a sudden needing to be very unrestricted and responsive in these times?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. First, I'll say it is quite sunny here in Denver today, actually, and not too cold at all. But yeah, we've obviously, like so many of us around the country, had to pivot in a pretty dramatic and rapid way. And I'd say, some of the things that we immediately embraced were flexibility and getting resources as quickly as possible to grantees to use in the manner that they believed was most necessary during this crisis. So flexibility around general operating support, which actually is something that the Denver Foundation tends to do more so than programmatic support. So that wasn't a hard shift for us, but something that we absolutely have put at the core of all the grant making that we're doing presently, is to go with general operating support. And then relaxing some of the data gathering and metrics reporting, some of the reporting generally that we expect grantees to give to us. All of that has been relaxed significantly. We're also trying to be prudent. While all of us are trying to work quickly, we also need to be thoughtful and prudent. We will get to the other side of this someday. And, I suspect something that we all are maybe thinking about is not only what are the impacts of all of this mobilization of philanthropy now, but how is this going to be seen in hindsight, 6 months from now, a year from now? What are those grants that were made, and how is that going to be scrutinized by external folks out in the community? And so we need to be thoughtful while also being as deliberative and as fast moving as we possibly can be.
Javier, I appreciate that. I want to switch over to Judy. Yeah, please. I want to hear what's happening in your shop.
Sure. Our shop's a little bit different. We live in a community like that old. If you've seen one community foundation, you've seen them. We're much smaller, but we're still, we're mighty. So I think especially relevant for the smaller foundations is understanding that our job is to act in ways that are relevant amid this chaos and sort of find our space, because there are a lot of different people in some communities trying to step up to do something. And I think, Javier pointed out the fact that we're here for the long term. So there may be things where we don't have to be first across the finish line, but we have to figure out how are we most relevant. And part of how we started that process, as David mentioned, was needing to be iterative. We thought about how could we loosen up some existing funds? What could we repurpose? What could we stretch out? what might we have in existing requests? And so what we looked at first was we had a number of grants that were already made. And were any of those grants things that might no longer be a priority for the organizations that have received them? Might there be greater priorities due to the coronavirus pandemic? So would those organizations like to repurpose those grants, you know, if they were not something that was already spent? So we actually, our drug court, just as an example, we made a grant to our drug court for $14,000, and they came back and said, you know, we really would like to repurpose this grant. Instead of using it for this other project, could we use it? A number of our clients are people who are having trouble making ends meet right now, and they're people who are in great danger of relapse if they have limited resources, if they can't make their rent, if they don't have food in the house, things of that nature. Could we repurpose our grant to do direct assistance for our clients in ways that make sense to their individual situations? And we gave them permission to repurpose that grant. So we also looked at how are ways that we can fill gaps. For example, in our community, a lot of our arts and culture organizations are essential to the quality of life. Well, in a time of crisis like this, those are not the entities that most organizations think of in terms of sending money first out the door towards. So we are looking at, you know, possibly allowing them to repurpose some of the grants that might have been given for a capital project or a non-essential project at this point, in ways that help to keep them, help to preserve their ability to survive and to, you know, get through this crisis. We're also looking at how can we stretch out our grants, and as we did that, we have a couple grant cycles a year from our unrestricted grant making funds. So we reviewed those requests and we sent an electronic survey out to each organization asking, is this time sensitive? In light of the present pandemic, is this a priority? Or, you know, is this something that you would voluntarily want to push to a future grant cycle? You know, no problem if you want to postpone this. And so immediately we are able to change some of our present priorities to be able to use some of those monies toward the process that we might not otherwise have had available. And lastly, looking at ways that either, you know, we can, in our case, we had an existing fund that was called the Hunger Fund and a safety net fund for emergency needs that we are using to receive assistance for the coronavirus assistance from the public. But, you know, while other foundations are starting up their own assistance funds. So we're sort of putting all of those things together to try to raise the resources that we would have otherwise had available to meet these needs that are hitting our plate now.
Thanks, Judy. I appreciate that. You know, Darren, I'd be very curious. I know you operate with lots of donor advised funds. What's been the take on how you've been utilizing them in these times?
Yeah, thank you, Brad, for the opportunity to be on this call this afternoon. One of the things that we quickly realized, like I think Javier and Judy pointed out, is that mobilizing resources and maybe moving up a grant cycle are important. But the Relief and Recovery Fund that we started was really seeded by unrestricted dollars that we have at the foundation, matched with donor advised fund holders, grants, internal transfer, and then 4 other foundations in our region. We serve 9 counties. And so we actually engaged a short list of about 20 donors, asked them to match our $50,000, and then use that to seed our Relief and Recovery Fund. And that's actually gone over pretty well with our donors. We're also asking them not only for the short-term immediate needs in this fund, but the longer-term resources that we know we're going to need as this crisis lingers on, to consider thinking about maybe delaying some grant making now in response to future needs that we know we're going to have to leverage money down the road.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate that. I wanted to bring Christy in. You have been working on education and building some capacity with your nonprofits even in this virtual world now. Maybe just a little bit about what those resources look like and how you're approaching that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be on the call. You know, one of the things, just last week, we had a web developer reach out to us and ask, you know, what can we do? And we took advantage of that. And one of the needs that we have right now is a way for nonprofit organizations to communicate with the current 211 system, which is kind of the first call for both those individuals that have needs, but also right now those individuals that think that they might need testing or might need to go to the doctor. That's the first call, and our Iowa Department of Public Health is staffing that for those calls. And as nonprofits, we're trying to update them. Sometimes the wait time is 4 hours long just to provide that information. So we very quickly, actually, over the weekend, deployed this for-profit technology company to write some code for us and develop a portal where nonprofit organizations can go in and submit the services that they're providing specific to COVID-19, but there's also a portal for any nonprofit organization, whether it's arts, whether it's education or human service providing, to really provide information about the services they're providing, but also the gaps that they're seeing, issues that they're having, as just a way for us to track in our community what those issues are. And more than anything, it's a way for our nonprofit community to feel heard by us and to see something very quickly mobilized to capture that information that we then can do something about down the road. So that was one just example I wanted to share of a way we're trying to quickly mobilize resources in the community and use those that are reaching out wanting to help. We also have givedsm.org, which is a current portal where nonprofits can post their funding needs, and donors can search by areas of interest, any donor, not just community foundation donors. And over the weekend, we were able to put up a specific field of interest called COVID-19, and then any nonprofits who have specific needs in that area are populating their needs to that field of interest so that donors interested can quickly search and provide funding in response to those needs populated. You could have funding in a day if you put something up there. We have, in addition to that, webinars. We have one that was already scheduled for tomorrow before this all happened, called Building Better Virtual Meetings. So obviously that's very popular with our nonprofit sector right now. And we're also having several webinars with our affiliates. We have 31 county-based affiliates, and we're getting the COVID-19 philanthropy pledge in front of them and talking with all of them about how they might shift their grant making as well during this time. So we're definitely using technology to our advantage to keep the work going virtually.
Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate that. Monique, I'd be curious, any differences? What else are you guys layering on up there in Evanston?
A few different things. So we obviously have a group of grantees who participate in nonprofit workshops ongoing. So we didn't want to stop that in the case that they want to do it, continue it. So we are switching all of our in-person workshops to online and using the breakout room portion of that. And we're excited about it. It'll be a first for probably most of us. So we'll test it out this year. We do workshops all year round. They're free to the community. So at times there were upwards of 150 people in one room. So we'll get to see how this works out for us in the coming weeks. But in addition to that, to address the COVID-19, we created some virtual space to communicate. On behalf of the mayor of the city who pulled us into it, he just needed a space for us to show leadership in the nonprofit sector. And so we created a separate email address that's er@evanstonforever.org. And one of my staff members monitors it daily to see what questions and concerns are coming in. And we filled that as a part of the mayor's task force for COVID-19, and I participated in that. So it helped us speak with one voice for the nonprofit community. Evanston is 8 square miles, 75,000 people. We're the only community foundation there. So it really helps that we can coalesce around that one space virtually and get all the answers that they need, and also get them funding fairly quickly through that space, also through our emergency response fund. So twofold there, where we're trying to connect virtually in a space that we are just kind of stepping into right now. But I think being able to do this and teaching the nonprofit sector that we can do this now will help us throughout the rest of the year. We don't know how long this will last, but this will be a tool that we can use ongoing.
Thank you, Monique. I really do appreciate that. You know, Mike, thinking of tools and supporting the nonprofits, there's a lot of discussion among the field about just activating existing day giving programs. I believe you've done this. You've reorientated your Giving Day program for COVID-19. You want to comment real quickly on what that took and how that played out?
Sure, Brad. Couple comments. There's a million ways we could all engage in our communities, and it's almost overwhelming to think about what to do. I guess my first advice for the peers on the phone is get your boards engaged. Make sure you got backup, because we're all sort of dealing in unprecedented times and perhaps doing things we've never done before. Then I would recommend that you convene sort of other funders in your community, if you haven't done this already, to try to figure out what unique niche you can fill in your community. So we did both of those things, and we thought a good thing that we could do would be to reactivate, and we're calling it an emergency Erie Gives. We have a very strong Giving Day brand. It's usually in August. Last year we raised $5 million from, 9,000 donors. And we got the whole thing up and running in a couple days, reoriented it, kept the brand, Erie Gives, in an emergency. And we actually got other funders to contribute the matching gift seed fund, and then we are all collectively deciding what to do with it. So it's become this portal that not only donor advisors, corporate partners, but also the general public can give to, and then we're making collective decision making amongst us with all of our other grantee partners. So we thought that was a good niche for us. It'll vary in every community. You have to get comfortable working without a net here, and the way to do that is make sure you got your board in back of you.
Mike, just another quick question that came in through the attendees that I thought I'd just throw at you really quickly. You're also collaborating with your local United Way. Can you give a framework of how that's playing out?
Yeah, they were one of the partners that we convened on the conference call, and we've had a decades-long good relationship with our United Way here. I know that's not the case in every community, but they're actually a funding partner for this emergency Giving Day that we're talking about. By the way, I say day, it's going to be up till the end of March and maybe later, depending on demand. So, but we've worked hard to have a good relationship with our United Way. We're different, we compete, but in this case, we're certainly coming together.
I caught a smile by Darren when you mentioned that. Darren, I'd be curious, are you operating with United Way on the fundraising side, on the funding side? What's it look like for your shop?
Yeah, we're doing it on both ends. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned earlier, we have 9 counties, so we work across with 4 United Ways in our region, and all of us have agreed to do both things, to raise the dollars, and they have committed to doing that through our COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Fund, and then also to allocate the dollars that we raise as well. So we are using their internal infrastructure, 211. I think someone mentioned that earlier. They have several different direct assistance programs that we're going to be leveraging over the next several weeks as the hospitality industry and tourism and restaurants that have closed here on the coast, those workers need support. So we think that's just using existing infrastructure to do the work that we frankly already are going to be doing. So it's a good leverage, and we have great working relationships with our colleagues in the United Way network.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Monique, this brings up just the notion of collaboration in general. You're doing this not necessarily with United Way, but you're doing it with other funders. Could you talk a little bit about that?
We are. While we have United Way as a partner and a neighborhood network in our collective impact program, for this particular venture, they actually partnered with a larger Chicago community trust in the city, but we're right north of Chicago. And so what I did was reached out to some of our family foundations to partner and got my board to agree to seeding the fund with $100,000 from our own dwindling endowment right now. But that gave me the leverage to go to a couple of family foundations to match that. So we started it out last week. We're at not at $1 million yet. We're searching for it, but the people that I'm able to say, we funded this, we seeded this with $100,000, will you match it? They're happy to do it, and it works very great. They are donors who are very close to us, and then they also reach out to their family, friends, and their networks to put funds into the fund.
Thank you. Christy, could you flag the website one more time, the Give DSM? Is it just givedsm.org?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you. So givedsm.org for those of you on the line that were wanting to check that out. Javier, I'm going to ask one more question in the grant making, and then we're going to shift gears. Public-private partnerships more broadly. You're probably engaging, you know, on the municipality side and so forth. Be curious how that looks for you.
Yeah, there's tons of collaboration in Colorado across the philanthropic community, but also with the public sector. Governor Polis has really been out in front on this issue for several weeks now and shown tremendous leadership. And one of the things that he did early on was to make a call to the philanthropic community to come together and work together with the public sector to create a statewide fund. So that got set up through the United Way actually, but with leadership from philanthropic leaders around the state of Colorado. So it's a way where the public sector, working very closely with Governor Polis' staff and philanthropy leaders throughout Colorado, have joined forces to really help our state respond in an effective way. And you know what I found here now, almost 6 months living in Colorado, is that there's a tremendous spirit of collaboration across the public and the philanthropic sector, and it's really been put on stage during this crisis, the way that folks have come together. In addition to this statewide fund, the sort of Metro Denver funders are now talking about potentially a nonprofit loan assistance fund being stood up, and it's community foundations that are leading that conversation. And I was just on the phone this morning with Lori Slesky at the New York Community Trust to understand what they've done to set up a similar fund out there. So the collaboration across Colorado, in the Denver area, and even around the country has really been awe-inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This was all a healthy dose of good conversation. I am going to shift gears into operational now, just as we start coming into about 13 minutes left on this particular call. When we shift to operations and contingency plans that are in action, Christy, I think it was you that said you literally wrote it in a day and went straight to phase 2 on your plans, and I'm confident that many of you have been experiencing similar. I might start with Darren. Just a quick note on how you're adapting operational policies and procedures that have been most instrumental and influential in your work right now.
Well, the interesting thing, Brad, is because we live on the coast of South Carolina and we are subject to hurricanes just about every summer and fall, we do have a consistent business continuity of operations plan. And so, so that was pretty easy to adopt. What we would do in the case of being out of the office for 10 days. This obviously is a little bit longer, and because we are literally can't go to the office at this point, we've had to do some things from a approval standpoint, moving very quickly to electronic funds transfer for grant payments, all of those things that we're working through over the last 14 days, knowing that this crisis was going to hit us. We've also starting to look at just for the long term, looking at our spending policy in terms of maybe reducing that, frankly, with the way the markets are. So we have to have some conversations about that. And then we recently increased our fund minimum. And so we're looking at that as well, because there are some donors who want to actually be able to make some grants that their fund balance currently doesn't allow them to do. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at all that, all those essentially procedural things, and making some decisions about that as this crisis lingers on. So, but from a business continuity standpoint, we're kind of used to dealing with it being here on the coast, and so we've just amended that plan accordingly.
Thank you. Christy, anything different that you want to add, or anything that you want to share?
Just, I thought we had a disaster slash emergency response plan for our organization, but until you truly are faced with moving the entire thing remote in a matter of 24 to 48 hours, you don't think through every single detail. So I would say this has been a true blessing in disguise, and I love how it brought our team together to really think through all of our processes and very quickly move as much as we could to be electronic. Our board has been hugely responsive. We've had two $100,000 grants into our disaster recovery fund that we pulled together meetings, very quickly. Same with our grant-making committee. I think the biggest challenge, and I feel badly for our team members that both parents are at home, they're trying to work remotely, they've got very small children, and so we've really tried to be flexible, still in meeting our customer service standards in terms of being responsive to phone calls and emails during working hours, but it's not that you need to work that full hour, it's that you're being responsive, and then you just work when you can, and when it makes sense to you. There are some that obviously have been working around the clock for several days and spinning things out to our community, but it's also a good chance for our donor relations team to really just be getting in touch with our donors and making those personal calls and using their time that way. So it's all about adaptability, but you also do see the stress mounting in the team. So it's a matter of keeping everybody calm.
Thank you, Christy. Like all of you, I've seen my annual, work plan blow up, and that includes all the metrics that we once had in play. So Javier, I'm just curious, how are you adapting, those annual plans and frankly, the metrics that you had in play, especially coupling that on with a worsening economic condition to add to the burden?
Yeah, we're actually in the middle of strategic planning. So the plan this year was to bring the current strategic plan in for a landing and launch a new strategic framework in Q1 of 2021. We were deep in the middle of community conversation to build that vision in that direction. We've obviously hit pause on that. We'll try to do what we can online to gather that information. But, frankly, I think it also is an opportunity to pause and think about the role of philanthropy in a post-COVID world, the role of community foundations in this different world. I mean, the title of this seminar is around the new normal. Well, I think normal is going to get an extreme makeover as a result of all of this. And so that's what I think this allows us to do, is to think about how we just do our work differently, how we think about these things differently, what the role of philanthropy is in society, in creating an equitable and just society. One of the issues that I'll just sort of throw out there is the role of government vis-a-vis the role of philanthropy. I applaud the Gates Foundation for moving quickly and early on to provide the proper testing for folks in the Seattle area that were obviously impacted by this before the rest of us were. But, we shouldn't let government off the hook. The fact that the federal government is not providing the adequate amount of resources to our public health agencies and hospitals throughout the country shouldn't mean that philanthropy has to step in and fill that gap entirely. I think we have the ability to move quickly and to put risk capital on the table and to create solutions that work, but then government needs to take that on and scale those solutions. So I think we just need to be mindful of philanthropy's powerful role, but not necessarily assume that we alone can fix a situation like the one that we're living through. So I think, again, that's going to help guide and inform our conversation with our board about what this new strategic framework looks like for the Denver Foundation.
Monique, I'm going to ask you the same. Yeah.
Correct. We were also in the middle of strategic planning. In February, we launched our strategic planning process. So this hit us like a Mack truck, which is fine because it's reality. We were also in the middle of working with Spectrum Nonprofit Services to do a matrix mapping, what our mission versus our margin is, so that we could actually think about it moving forward. So now we're in this space where we need to continue doing that with the reality of what COVID-19 is doing. So how we've adjusted is, like, we're about to launch or go to print with our annual report from 2019, which says 2019 was lovely, which it was, but now it's not a lovely place to be in. So I need to bring reality to that with a cover page so it goes out telling people what we're going to do. And actually, we're leaning in a little bit more to our endowment, and we're not considering cutting the spending rate, because our thought is, if we do more right now, that may alleviate what we need to work out in the back end. So a couple of different places to adjust our annual plan. Metrics, I don't even know what they are. Like, I have no idea how we're measuring anything right now. And my board and I have had that very honest discussion that, give me a few weeks and we'll talk about it again. But right now I feel like we're trying to save the city, and we're going to move forward with that intent, with a strategy in hand. But day-to-day operations are ever changing, and I've alerted the board that they will change, and I will keep them abreast and informed, and we will keep moving in that way.
I could easily spend all day with you fine folks. I'm having a little too much fun. Let's do a quick round robin. I want to get just a quick 20, 30-second final comment. Mike Batchelor, you're on the line. Can I start with you?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks again for everybody, what you're doing. I would say this is a time for leadership, and you can't do everything, but you can do something. So I think the most important thing is to take some action, get your board engaged, and this is a time for helping to lead your communities, because they need our help. Thanks.
Thank you. Christy.
Well, I've been in the field for 18 years, and I would have to say I've never seen the community foundation field stronger. I've never been more proud to work in this field, and I'm observing many, many times a day why we do what we do and how we're positioned to lead in our communities, and we will lead our communities through this.
Monique?
Hi, you guys. So my background is a clinical therapist, and I've been out of practice for years, but you never forget those things. So I always tell people who are on the helping space to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. So there will be a time when we are past this, and you will still need to be there for your families and your friends and your community. So I'm just going to throw that out there. You know the world is messy, but take care of yourselves in the process.
Thank you. Darren.
Yeah, I think for me, what I would share with the group is to have and provide, to Mike's point, leadership, clarity about what's happening and what's going on, and then when we do have the opportunity to act decisively. I think our community requires us to do that in these times.
Javier?
Maybe just a quick reflection on heroes. You know, after 9/11, police, fire, military personnel were lifted up, and rightly so. And I think this current crisis is lifting up our healthcare professionals in a way that's important. I think all of us who are having to homeschool children at home are probably also thinking about the role that teachers play in our society, and I hope that they get lifted up as heroes in this post-COVID world as well.
Judy.
Well, I think most important to me is, I think, you know, I've seen a couple financial crises before in our country at the age I'm at. This is a little different. The uncertainty that people are feeling as far as their personal needs being met is frightening to them. I think we have to recognize that people are scared, whether that's, you know, people in the public or our own staff. And so I think as leaders of community foundations, we have to model the behaviors that we want out of our staff and out of our donors and out of our agency partners at this time. I think calmness and the ability to walk forward, you know, together with that calm is going to be helpful as a whole for the community.
I couldn't do this without each of you. I want to thank you one more time just for sharing your expertise. There are so many resources that are out there to be taken advantage of. You heard about them in the beginning, coming from Deborah at CF Leads and David over at CF Insights and Kathleen here at the council. So for all of you who are on the line, continue to dig in. There are resources that are being shown right now on the screen where you can share what your efforts are doing so that we can help synergize those across different channels and make sure that people know how to connect with you when they're trying to duplicate or implicate some kind of a program or implement, that's what I'm looking for, implement a program that you have going. There's funder calls that are going to continue to be taking every other Thursday that are going to bring the sector together and be just having dialogues here at the council. So you can look for those on Thursdays. For the members of the council, I've never seen the philanthropy exchange, the old listservs, as active as they are right now, with people just sharing policies and procedures and templates and things like that. So it's a great place to crowdsource for things that you're looking for and to post your questions, your very specific questions, and get really good answers from your colleagues. Our legal team is here and they're doing their very best to not just support members, they're trying to provide resources that can be used by the entire field, and they're posting them online daily to try to navigate hardship funds and how to deal with loan and bridge grants, those types of things. We'll continue to accept your requests for information. We'll continue to accept your questions and do our best to turn those into FAQs that more people can gain access to. We're also going to continue to try to figure out how to adapt this particular roundtable to be helpful to all of you. So we'll take your feedback on how to do that. We'll have more coming forward with that. But with that, one more time, I want to thank Mike, Judy, Javier, Darren, Monique, and Christy. You're awesome. Thanks for your time, your wisdom, and your leadership. And to all of you listening in, thank you for what you're doing in your communities. Please stay safe, keep your distance, and we'll be hopefully talking again soon. Bye-bye.